Have you ever looked at something huge, like a jetliner crossing the sky, and just thought, how? How did we get here? Who first figured that out? Well, today we're diving deep into that very question, exploring the incredible story of the Wright brothers. We've pulled together quite a bit for this one, notes, historical accounts, the works, to really get into the surprising details behind the invention of the airplane. Our mission, really, is to unpack not just what they did, but the how. How their, well, unique way of thinking and just sheer perseverance changed everything. It's way more than just that one famous flight picture, you know?
Oh, absolutely. And you really need the context to grasp how huge their success was, because the 1890s, that decade was littered with failed flying machines. Seriously, some of the smartest people with money, were trying all over the place.
Yeah.
And mostly spectacular crashes. Or hawks, maybe? Nothing sustained. Flight was like this impossible puzzle back then, a frontier that just kept beating people back, sometimes tragically.
Right. So let's start at the beginning, which is maybe not where you expect. Wilbur Wright, born April 16th, 1867, and his brother Orville, August 19th, 1871, both born here in the U.S. They had 5 other siblings, and their parents were pretty interesting influences. Their dad, Milton Wright, he was bishop. And their mom, Susan Wright, she had this knack for math and tools, which was maybe a bit unusual for the time. And, sometimes these huge world-changing things start small. For them, it was apparently a toy. Yeah, their dad brought home this little toy helicopter made of, paper, cork, bamboo, rubber bands, and it actually flew. Buzzed around the room, just a little thing, but it sparked something in them. This lifelong fascination, maybe even obsession with, how things fly.
And what's really interesting is their education, or lack thereof. In a formal sense, neither brother went to college. But they were clearly incredibly smart, very creative. They loved reading, figuring things out, building stuff, fixing things. That hands-on, self-taught approach, learning by doing, that was absolutely fundamental later on. It let them tackle these really complex engineering problems that, frankly, stumped people with more formal training.
And before flight, they were businessmen. First a printing shop,
That's
right?
great.
And then famously a bicycle shop in Dayton, Ohio, repairing and selling bikes. Which leads to the big question.
Okay.
How on earth does fixing bikes lead to inventing the airplane? Seems like a leap.
It does, yeah, on the surface. But this is where their genius really comes in. Think about it. While others are building these huge, powerful engines, often steam-powered, the Wrights are in their shop day in, day out, working with bicycles. What are they learning?
Balance. Steering.
Exactly. The subtle mechanics of balance, dynamic steering, how tiny adjustments keep you upright, that everyday, hands-on feel for control. That's what the others were missing.
Okay, so back in the late 1890s, as you said, lots of people trying to fly. Europe, America, big names, big money sometimes, but mostly failure. Crashes or machines that just, couldn't really be controlled once they were airborne for a second or two. The focus was all on power. Yeah, getting off the ground. And this is where the Wright's bicycle experience clicks in. It's this fundamental shift in thinking. They saw flight not just as a problem of lift, like pushing something heavy into the air, but as a problem of control, like riding a bike, constant tiny adjustments. They weren't just trying to build a powerful engine strapped to wings. They were trying to build something you could actively fly, steer, balance.
That perspective shift was everything. Almost everyone else was obsessed with lift. How do we get this thing off the ground? Power, bigger wings, more power. The Wrights, though, they zeroed in on control. How do we turn? How do we stay level? How do we handle gusts of wind? They realized that was the real barrier. Control first. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many big problems today might just need that kind of shift in focus away from the obvious?
And their solution for control was, it was brilliant. Wing warping. Totally new idea. Can you explain that a bit? It sounds complicated.
It's actually kind of elegant. Imagine twisting the ends of the wings just slightly in opposite directions. One trailing edge goes up a bit, the other down. This changed the lift on each wing, allowing the pilot to roll the aircraft, bank it into turns, and crucially, maintain balance. It's like how a bird adjusts its wings, or how you lean a bike. Genius, really.
Okay, so they've got these ideas. They're building gliders based on them. Now they need somewhere to test them safely. And they land on Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Why there?
Several reasons. It had strong, steady winds coming off the Atlantic, which was great for getting lift with gliders. It was remote, wide open space.
Privacy.
And maybe most importantly, soft sand. Lots of it. Because they knew they'd be crashing. A lot. Soft landings were essential.
And they put in the time. 1900, 1901, 1902. Testing glider after glider. And yeah, lots of crashes, short flights. But the key is they learned from every single one.
And it wasn't just trial and error out on the dunes. This is incredible. when their early gliders didn't perform the way existing aerodynamic data said they should. They didn't just tweak the glider, no. They went back to Dayton, to their bike shop, and built their own wind tunnel, a sophisticated scientific instrument.
In the bike shop.
Seriously. They meticulously tested hundreds of different wing shapes, basically generating their own correct aerodynamic data. They realized the existing tables were wrong for the speeds and shapes they needed. It shows this amazing blend of hands-on engineering and rigorous science. Every failure wasn't just a setback, it was data driving the next step.
So after all that painstaking work, the glider tests, the wind tunnel data, they finally felt ready. They designed the 1903 Wright Flyer.
And it incorporated all those lessons. A lightweight but strong wooden frame, wings covered in muslin cloth, a small engine they had custom built because nothing suitable existed, and critically, the propellers. They realized propellers weren't just screws pushing air. They treated them like rotating wings, applying their own airfoil data to design highly efficient ones, much better than anyone else's. That efficiency was key to getting airborne with a relatively low-power engine.
Okay, so set the scene. December 17th, 1903. Kitty Hawk. It's cold, windy, not exactly a huge crowd, just a few local witnesses from the life-saving station. Orville climbs aboard, lies flat on the lower wing, starts the engine, the propellers whir,
Let it move forward.
lifts off the launching rail, and it's flying. It only lasted 12 seconds, covered just 120 feet. Orville was at the controls. But in those 12 seconds, history was made. The first sustained, controlled, powered flight of a heavier-than-air machine. It actually happened.
It's just incredible. And they didn't just pack up then. They made 3 more flights that same day. Wilbur took a turn, and the final flight, with Wilbur piloting, covered 852 feet in 59 seconds. Almost a full minute. They proved it wasn't a fluke. It was real.
You'd imagine headlines around the world the next day, right? Parades.
Not quite. Not even close, actually. There was a lot of skepticism. Some newspapers reported it, but many dismissed it or buried the story. The scientific community, remembering all those previous failures, was largely unconvinced. Was it just a powered hop? Could they repeat it? Could they really control it?
So the Wrights, being methodical, knew they needed more proof. They kept working, refining their designs back in Ohio.
Exactly. They didn't stop. By 1905, their Flyer III was a genuinely practical aircraft. It could fly for over half an hour, turn, circle, do figure eights, real, sustained, controlled flight. But even then, convincing people, especially in the U.S., was tough. So eventually they had to basically take the show on the road to Europe.
Right, they went over there to do public demonstrations.
Yes, starting in 1908. And in France, particularly, the crowds were huge. They saw Wilbur flying, banking, turning, doing things no one had ever seen an aircraft do. People were absolutely stunned. Kings, officials, the public. They finally saw it with their own eyes. That's when the skepticism really started to melt away. They were finally getting the recognition.
And by 1909, they were international celebrities. Flying demonstrations for massive crowds, royalty. The world finally caught on. They'd done it.
So if you step back and look at the whole picture, their impact is just immense. It wasn't just inventing an airplane, it was inventing the first successful one, making sustained, controlled, powered flight a reality. That kicked off the entire age of aviation. And they even started the right company to manufacture planes. They literally launched an industry.
It's such a powerful story. Sadly, Wilbur's life was cut short. He died in 1912 from typhoid fever, only 45.
Yeah, a real tragedy. Who knows what else he might have achieved.
But Orville lived much longer, until 1948. He continued working in aeronautics and science. Even though Wilbur died young, their combined work had already changed the world irrevocably. I mean, just look around today. International travel, jets, helicopters, even spaceflight owes a debt to those fundamental principles of controlled flight they figured out. And that original 1903 Flyer, it's sitting in the Smithsonian, a tangible piece of that history. I think the lesson here is just profound. 2 brothers, essentially bicycle mechanics from Ohio, right?
All right.
Driven by curiosity, this relentless work ethic, this refusal to give up despite setbacks. They proved that seemingly impossible things can be done. Innovation doesn't always come from the established experts.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? What does their story mean for us today? You have to wonder. How many challenges we're facing now? Maybe the solution isn't some super complex high-tech thing. Maybe it's about finding a simple fundamental insight like they did with control over lift, and then just having the persistence to see it through.
It's a great point. Maybe think about something you're working on right now, some problem you're wrestling with. Could there be a shift in perspective? A detail everyone else is overlooking. Maybe focusing on the control aspect instead of just the lift. Could be your breakthrough, just like it was for the Wrights.